A Beacon in the Dark by Noha Ijiachi. Chapter 41. Walk over those obstacles.
Okay, this definitely surprised us.
The voice of the doctor that invited Izuku and his mother in to speak alone with them is indecisive.
Do you see these spots? They are...
Oh, I can't see. Izuku interrupts him flat. Normally, he'd be kinder, but he already feels disgruntled after spending pretty much the entire morning getting dragged left, right, and center for the exams he had to do. Literally. There's a moment of silence and a little embarrassed cough matching the flash of shame Izuku is feeling for the man.
I apologize, I hadn't been told. Well,
Rustle of paper.
Midoriya, as I was saying, the results of your exams definitely surprised all of us. The brain scans we did showed us unusual activity which lines up with the information we already had regarding your quirk. But there are definitely things we did not expect. On top of the unusual shape of your brain, which is again very likely explained by your type of quirk, there are spots on the scan that are akin to scarring. Do you have any idea of what could have possibly caused them?
Izuku blinks, and his short-lived surprise rapidly gets buried down the guilt as, by his side, Mom's light seems to almost squirm with an astonished sense of pain. He sighs, massaging the bridge of his nose. He feels a vague ache in his temples, which he can't decide if it's caused by his overactive imagination or the stress he can already feel building up inside him. It's probably because... well, it's a long story, he mutters, shaking his head. Short version, I stressed my quirk way over the limits more than a couple of times. I'm going to guess it's the aftermath of that.
What makes you think that?
When I stress my quirk, I tend to get symptoms like nose bleeding and bleeding from other places in very extreme cases, headaches, stuff like that. Izuku replies, sounding almost casual, even if he was still massaging the bridge of his nose.
I see. I guess you most likely got it right.
The doctor continues pensive.
The problem with quirks akin to yours is how little we know about the way they function and how difficult it is to study them in action due to, well, obvious reasons.
A sigh.
It's hard to define how old the scarring is, so I'm not sure. I can confirm if your suspicion is right. Have you stressed your quirk recently?
Not to the point of getting those symptoms, no. Izuku sighs.
Okay, that's good. I definitely recommend to keep doing so. We definitely don't want the damage to expand.
The doctor says, clearly relieved.
Has there been any noticeable effects? A sudden change in habits or strange temperament?
Izuku frowns, confused by the question, but he realizes the doctor must have addressed Mom directly when she sighs. No, nothing out of the ordinary, I'd say, she replies contrite. He's a growing boy, and there have been definitely changes in his life, but nothing I'd say is caused by the... scarring. The doctor sniffs, going silent for a few seconds before murmuring,
I see. It's very probable that your brain is more resistant in some ways, but still. The fact we have these signs definitely hints to the fact that stressing of your quirk for long periods of time might be too much to handle even for it, and damage caused by that will probably stay permanent.
A huff.
I'd advise you to be careful and absolutely do not stress your quirk to that point under any circumstances. I don't want to terrify you, but one more injury like this, and depending on the part of your brain it's being inflicted, might be enough to permanently cripple you. Or worse.
Izuku visibly gulps, even though he knew already where this conversation was going to end up the moment the doctor spoke of signs of scarring. He remembers moments of his fight with Muscular and his desperate search for Kachan hazily, like attempting to make out shapes through a thick fog. How close had he been in those instances to damage himself to the point of no return? In a sense, he should probably count himself lucky. That said, the quiet soup of sadness and anger he feels bubbling inside his mother isn't very consoling, nor hints to the fact she shares his opinion about his luck. Neither his friends, nor Shoto or All Might will either, probably.
Well, in any case, is your file for your therapist?
The doctor cuts through his thoughts, gently depositing a something papery in his lap.
All the info she asked for and everything else we did not expect to find. If you get those symptoms you spoke of again, or you feel like something isn't right, absolutely do not hesitate to get checked out. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Izuku replies quietly, carefully slipping the file inside his bag, his mother's hand heavy on his shoulder. Anything else?
Oh, besides another very passionate invite to please be careful, young man. You've got a lifetime in front of you, so don't rush things, okay?
The man replies, clearly sympathetic.
I understand that young aspiring heroes like you are very impatient to prove their worth, but I promise you nothing it's worth hurting yourself over.
Understood. Izuku murmurs, getting back up on his feet. Thank you.
If you need anything.
Izuku stays silent as the man steps by his mother's side, his light suggesting he's handing something to her. Thank you so much, she replies strangely flat. She still has a hand on Izuku's shoulder. They bid their farewell to the doctor before stepping out. Mom only lets him go once they reach Miki, who waited for them outside. She keeps going, silent, as his friend gets up from the plastic chairs and hooks an arm under his, following her out the hospital.
Oh, man, she looks pissed.
Miki murmurs, making him wince.
What happened?
I'll tell you when we're in a more private place. Izuku sighs. Miki stays silent, her light giving off waves of worries. Feeling guilty, and yet knowing there was nothing he could do not to make her worry, Izuku sighs once more and shifts his hand to hook his fingers in Miki's elbow, turning his quirk off and trusting her in guiding him the way she used to do so, with ease, back in middle school. She seems to fall into place seamlessly, her voice subdued.
You look beat.
The news I got was simultaneously a shock, and yet not surprising at all, Izuku replies disgruntled. You know, it's stupid. I know that this was a long time coming, but I still feel like this is some instant karma crap.
What do you mean?
I did a really stupid thing recently, Izuku replies, massaging his forehead with his free hand. And on the spot I felt justified and like I was totally doing a good thing. But now that I'm more far removed from the situation, I realize I just let myself get dragged down by my own anger and frustration and acted like an absolute idiot. He releases a cold, short laugh. Which is such a novelty, right? He asks, sarcastic. Every time I think I learned my lesson, I just stumble and fall down in some other way. I'm really not going anywhere.
Izuku? Miki sighs. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm sure even if I asked you, you won't tell me.
A pang of guilt seizes his stomach, but she keeps going.
But you gotta think a bit better of yourself, okay? You've taken such big steps, and you're only 16. We are allowed to be idiots.
Not in the way I did, Izuku murmurs quiet. Not in the way I took calculated, cold choices to bother and trouble someone else, no matter how bad this person is and how much I dislike them. What I did really does not make me any better than them. Even if he has his radar off, it's not hard to imagine Miki's confusion. His tongue tingles with the need to admit what he did during that week with Endeavor, but telling her would mean revealing a lot more than Izuku had any right, nor was willing to reveal. He really felt like he had the right to act in such a way during those days. But then in the weeks to follow, as he went forward with his therapy sessions and as he found himself letting go of a lot of stress and anger thanks to that, and the preparations for the cultural festival, he truly realized how childish and stupid he acted, and how lucky he had been that his action didn't cause permanent consequences for Shoto and his family. Meeting Todoroki Rei just some days prior really cemented his shame for what he did. The woman that felt so caged and chained by her past, but still sounded so sincerely grateful to Izuku as she thanked him. Even when he tried again to apologize to Shoto about it, Shoto kind of waved him off. Izuku could understand why. Shoto still held a lot of rightful resentment toward his father, so he didn't protest at having his apology minimized. It wasn't on Shoto to forgive and absolve Izuku of his actions anyway. He will have to keep living with his shame, and hopefully learn something from it. Miki, he says, cutting through the silence, the voices and sounds of the traffic around them feeling almost muted. Would you like to come see our show at the cultural festival?
About time you'd ask, she replies, laughing. I thought you would be too ashamed of your lousy dancing to invite me.
A moment of pause, and when she speaks again, there's a sad note hidden under the joviality of her voice.
Of course I will come, you dum-dum.
It was clear that his mom was still pretty pissed off when she dropped him back at school and then drove herself and Miki away without the usual hug and kiss combo. Miki was perturbed as well, which Izuku couldn't exactly blame her for considering the bomb he dropped on her. If her reaction was anything to come by, he will have to do some intense consoling in the days to come. Izuku sighs, scratching his head, bag heavy with the stacks of papers that resulted from his day of exams. He knows how much his penchant for getting hurt also hurts his mother. It's not like he does it on purpose, but... Well, now that he truly knows how much he risks every time he gleefully ignores the limits of his quirks, maybe he'll stop being reckless. There's not much he could do to remedy to the damage he already caused, but at least now, hopefully, he'll stop worrying her so much. He's got a whole other bag of issues, though, as he walks back to his dormitory, Quirk off and Kane distractedly tip-tapping. Should he say anything to his friends about this? To All Might? He guesses he's got the right to keep things confidential. Technically speaking, he's got no obligation to disclose anything to anyone. But the idea doesn't sit well in his stomach. He feels a bit of a cheater, like he's trying to weasel himself out of the consequences of his actions at the idea of keeping in the dark all the people that have to put up with his crap. Besides, it'd probably be better for everyone involved if they knew. At least that way, if he was to ignore the risks once more in the future, he'd be surrounded by people ready to bring him back down to earth and stop him from potentially damaging himself further.
Did something happen?
Izuku jumps, shaking his head like a wet dog. He made it back to the dormitories pretty much on autopilot, not even bothering to check if anyone was in as he entered. No, I'm fine, Mineta. He rushes to reply, forcing what he knew was an unconvincing smile on his face. The hum he receives back is anything but convinced.
You sure? You look so gloomy, man.
Mineta insists, sounding vaguely worried.
Want to talk about it?
I'm fine, really. Just had a long day. Izuku replies with a shrug. There was something consoling in the fact his classmates seems to always pick up on his mood and always try to be kind to him, making him feel like he's not alone.
Okay, I guess.
Mineta replies with a little sigh.
But if you want to talk about it, I could listen, okay?
Oui, I would be enchanted to listen. Izuku blinks, turning vaguely toward the familiar voice that interjected at his left. He can't exactly say he's got a deep relationship with Aoyama, but his voice sounded just honest. A little happy laugh escapes him, and he knows his little smile must look far more genuine now. Thanks, Aoyama. No need to thank me. We are neighbors after all, oui? Yeah. Izuku agrees, mood definitely lifted, a little grin pulling at his lips. That we are. Did I miss something today?
Just more about she does hill courses and dancing, nothing new. We called it a day like 20 minutes ago.
Mineta replies, following after him as Izuku turns for the couches. Aoyama must be following too, going by the soft shuffling of slippers.
She'd probably make you double down on it tomorrow to make up for the fact you had to take a day off.
I can already feel my feet ache. Izuku exhales, letting himself fall down on the couch with his bag in his lap. Mineta huffs a laugh. When he speaks again, there's a clear smile in his voice.
Be prepared. I got some homework to finish before another day of crazy dancing. That okay?
Before Izuku can really answer, a tiny frown emerging on his face, he can feel the couch dipping a bit as Aoyama sits by his side.
You go, I'll stay,
he declares bombastic. Izuku blinks, silent, as Mineta bids them goodnight and his steps disappear into the distance. He turns with a tilted eyebrow toward Aoyama. You look like you could use company, Aoyama says matter-of-factly. The honesty is refreshing, at least. Izuku releases a little sigh and then gingerly fingers at the seams of his bag for a few seconds before just opening it and taking the stack of paper out, fingers sliding on it. Of course, he mutters, hanging his head down as he stuffs the paper back into his bag. Why was he so dumb as to expect it to be printed in Braille? The file was for his therapist, after all. He still would have liked to read it too, though, and he would have to wait another week before having a chance of giving it to her. I think we are similar, you and I, Aoyama declares, voice considerably softer than his usual tone, shaking him out of his thoughts. Huh? Our quirks do not fit our bodies, Aoyama continues, sounding pensive. Did you know that I had to wear a belt to contain my navel laser ever since I was a kid? And using it in rapid succession makes my stomach ache terribly. Izuku blinks. I didn't know, actually, he replies slowly. He hesitates, biting down on his lower lip. I have to admit that there had been times I wondered why my quirk caused my blindness. If it was meant to do that, or something just went wrong. Aoyama hums, sounding thoughtful. Still, even with our difficulties, we both made it in UA's prestigious hero course. He adds an undefinable tone behind his words. And we are now both in possession of a provisional license. Yeah? So we should keep going forward and support each other. He continues with a tone of finality before adding an almost hopeful, oui. It takes Izuku a moment of confusion before understanding clicks in his mind. Aoyama, since the start of school, seemed to mostly keep to himself, but was that entirely by choice? It wasn't really so long ago that Izuku himself wasn't surrounded by so many people that cared for him and appreciated him the way he was, flaws and all. Maybe it was the same for Aoyama. Maybe he was making an effort to reach out. He resists the temptation to activate his quirk. He ought to try to cheat a little less with that when he's confronted with something new. You were right, he says, a careful smile rising on his mouth. We both came a long way, and we should definitely support each other. We are neighbors, right? Indeed, Aoyama exclaims clearly, happy, his voice back to his usual bombastic tone. Izuku grins to himself, satisfied. It's good to know he doesn't always need to rely on his ability to pry into people's inner feelings to get a hint.
Movements have come to a standstill. They all seem to have fallen off the radar, and no suspicious rumors seem to be floating around.
Nimble fingers collect the papers scattered on the coffee table, tapping them into order before Toshinori hands them over.
I really don't know what to think. Part of me wants to be optimistic. Now that All for One is being held in prison, maybe without his guidance, Shigaraki cannot go on, after all. But at the same time, I cannot believe the League of Villains situation can be solved just like that.
Nothing seems to transpire on Night-Eye's impassive expression as he accepts the reports he's being handed. Toshinori leans back on the couch with a sigh, giving his ex-sidekick sitting by his side some minutes to skim over them. What does Tsugauchi think? Nighteye asks, looking up with sharp eyes over his glasses once he's done.
Same as me. He's dubious.
Toshinori replies with a shrug.
All signs seem to point to the fact the League might be no more, but he doesn't want to claim victory without concrete proof. And I agree, we cannot let our guards down.
So he will keep investigating. That's good, I trust his judgment. Nighteye murmurs, putting the reports down and then picking up his cup of tea to take a sip. I'll give him a call later. There's something I think might have a connection with the League, even if it's only based on my gut feeling.
Go on.
Toshinori invites, careful, after a moment of surprise. It's not exactly every day that Nighteye allows himself to express suspicions not based on concrete proof. According to the testimony of the members of the 8 precepts we could interrogate, something must have happened after Midoriya managed to escape with Eri, leaving behind a completely unguarded mansion. Some things seem to be missing.
Things?
Chisaki wasn't just using Eri to create that quirk-suppressing drug. He was also conducting an in-depth research about her quirk. Nida continues, voice low and eyebrows furrowed in the middle. And a lot of this research material, along with the stock of the drug, seems to be missing. It's unclear how that happened, and I have the feeling that Shigaraki must be involved somehow.
If that's the case, that's troubling.
Toshinori replies, pinching the bridge of his nose.
You haven't found a way to use your quirk and find confirmations, I imagine.
He was distractedly keeping his eyes on Nighteye as he spoke, but Toshinori did not miss the flash of something undefinable that seemed to pass in his eyes at that question.
Nighteye?
This is another thing I wanted to speak with you about other than the state of the investigation. Nighteye murmurs back, right hand curling over his mouth and eyes unfocused. The drug Chisaki was producing. Just before the arrest, he found out how to make the effect permanent. He must have used some of it during that battle. It's a good thing Red Riot was there to shield Eraserhead from those syringes, but... He sighs, shifting his hand away and looking back up at Toshinori. I got hit by one. Toshinori can't help but let out the sharp intake of surprise hissing through his teeth.
You mean...
He trails off when Nighteye offers one hand, palm up. Indecisive, he puts his finger over Night-Eye's, peering up at his expression of focus. A small, sad smile rises on Night-Eye's mouth after long seconds of silence. It doesn't work anymore. I might have lost my quirk for good.
Oh, Nighteye.
I know it's counterproductive, but I cannot help feeling slightly relieved. Nighteye replies, still sporting a lopsided smile as Toshinori closes his fingers around his hand in a firmer hold. When I saw you fighting against All for One, I was sure that must be it. What I saw back then. But you pulled through. You're still here. And now I cannot be certain of what awaits you, and part of me feels at peace, not having to know your destiny anymore. He releases a little sigh. I'm still managing at the office for now. A time when my lack of quirk might push me to retire could be closer than I think, but as long as I can still fulfill my duty, I will keep doing so. Maybe that's foolish of me.
I don't think it's foolish. I understand what you mean.
Toshinori replies, carting his free hand through his hair tiredly.
I always wondered how you dealt with the weight of knowing an unchangeable future.
Not easily, that's for sure, Nighteye says, giving one last squeeze to Toshinori's hand before gently letting go. But I'm not quite sure the future is as set in stone as I thought. You're right here, after all. And if losing my quirk was the price to pay to make sure Mirio can keep going forward, then I'm glad to have paid it. I'm sure that when I will not be able to keep up anymore, Mirio will be more than ready to step in my stead.
He's a good boy, a hero through and through.
A smile pulls at Toshinori's mouth as he watches the clear pride rising on Night-Eye's face at that compliment.
You've done an amazing job shaping him.
That means a lot. Thank you. They fall in a contemplative but relaxed silence, knees brushing. Toshinori is just so grateful to have reunited with his ex-sidekick. He cannot deny how much he's missed Nighteye in the long years since their fight. Could have things been different if they hadn't gone their own way at the time? Maybe they would. Maybe he should have listened to Nighteye back then. How different everything could have been if he had retired as Nighteye urged him to. Then again, he might have never met young Midoriya in that case, and that's certainly a thing Toshinori would never regret.
So, you are sure you are okay without a quirk?
He says softly, shaking himself out of the myriads of what-ifs that were trying to occupy his thoughts. Nighteye hums. I don't really have much of a choice, but I am fine with it. I wanted to tell you, not in search of pity, but because I wanted to make sure you'd know we cannot rely on my future sight anymore. I have already disclosed this information to the police and my collaborators. Toshinori doesn't have the time to let out a hum of understanding, interrupted by a soft knocking. He turns toward the door of his office, surprised. I take in you weren't expecting other visitors. Nighteye comments, tilting his head just vaguely. Toshinori shrugs at him before rising to go open the door. and find himself in front of an indecisive-looking young Midoriya, not in his school uniform, but with a bag slung over his shoulder.
Huh. I hope I'm not disturbing.
The boy says, frowning just vaguely. It's clear by the way he's clutching his cane that he's got his quirk turned off at the moment.
Of course not.
Nighteye replies peaceful, making the boy jump just slightly.
Oh, hello, sir.
Young Midoriya exclaims, surprised.
I didn't know you were here. I can come back later if...
That is quite all right.
Toshinori interjects, putting a soft touch on the boy's shoulder and guiding him inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click.
What brings you here?
It's... well...
Young Midoriya shifts his weight from foot to foot, clearly indecisive, not sitting down even when Toshinori guided him toward his usual stool.
If this is a private matter, I can leave.
Nighteye pipes up as the boy trails off, but young Midoriya shakes his head.
No, it's... fine. I guess this is something I'd have to tell you, too, if you still want me back at the office.
Of course I still want you back at the office.
Nighteye replies easily, adjusting his glasses.
You and Mirio could make quite the duo with some work. I'm not giving up on that.
That finally manages to pry a smile out of the boy, if small and lopsided.
Okay, then,
he says, as he carefully sits down and folds his cane. Toshinori takes his place back by Night-Eye's side as the boy rummages in his bag and produces a small stack of papers out of it, handing it over silently. Toshinori exchanges a short look with his ex-sidekick before taking it. Young Midoriya rests both hands in his lap, still quiet, as the two of them bend over the documentation to skim it together. Toshinori has gone through enough medical procedures to be able to translate the information presented well enough, and he knows that Nighteye, ever prepared, won't have trouble either, which is confirmed by the thin-lipped frown he launches at him when Toshinori meets his eyes with what he knows must be an anguished expression.
Young Midoriya.
The boy winces.
I know,
he sighs, putting both hands up.
I know it's not... nice.
That's an understatement. What did you even do to get to this?
Nighteye asks, voice low and flat, just barely disguising the clear worry fingers tapping on the paper.
Oh, right, I guess you don't know.
Young Midoriya replies, hanging his head on a side tiredly.
It's kind of a long story. Like, really long.
He sniffs.
You might decide to fire me if I tell you.
I'm not kicking you out the office, Midoriya.
Nighteye replies with a small head shake.
But I still would like to know how come you've arrived to the point of damaging yourself so severely.
Look, I know it's kind of selfish of me to ask, but can you get filled in by All Might?
That's enough to make Toshinori jump just a tiny bit, as he was still reading some of the exam results.
I'll have to go back to the dormitory in a bit, and I kind of needed someone to read that to me for obvious reasons,
he adds, gesturing vaguely at his pale eyes.
I can't wait a week for my therapy appointment. I really want to know how bad that looks before I show it to Shoto and my friends and make their heads explode with worry.
He finishes, looking unamused.
I didn't think you'd want to tell them.
Toshinori manages to drag out of his throat, wary.
The boy's got a point. His friends were surely going to take this badly.
I thought about not telling them for a bit, but with everything that has happened and everything they went through because of me, yeah, I'm not dumb enough to pretend they wouldn't find out in a way or another.
Young Midoriya replies, putting his elbow on a knee and resting his chin in his palm.
So I'd prefer to tell them myself and face the music sooner rather than later, so we can move on and get to the point where I can see how to deal with my quirk going forward.
The stack of papers feels like it weighs more than it should in Toshinori's hands as he looks at the boy. He doesn't seem crestfallen mostly, quietly determined to tackle yet another obstacle in his way. One last silent exchange of looks and a nod from Nighteye was enough to make Toshinori let out a small sigh before saying,
Very well, I'll inform Nighteye about the issues you've encountered with your quirk later. For now, we'll read this to you.
Kansuke jumps just a tiny bit when something lands heavily on the grass at his side. He turns eyebrows furrowing more than usual, as Deku makes himself comfortable, belly up and hands crossed under his head.
What now? You're trying to be a ninja?
Deku let out a huffy, soft laugh through his nose. There was an expression between annoyed and amused on his face. You just didn't hear me because you were too focused on whatever it is that you were doing. He turns just slightly, pale eyes pointed up at him. What are you doing? Resisting the temptation to close the notebook resting on his knees. No point, he can't see it anyway. Katsuki makes himself more comfortable against the trunk of the tree he's been sitting on for the last half hour.
None of your business, nerd.
Deku raises an eyebrow, following with his face the arc of the drumstick Katsuki distractedly launched in the air and then caught again. His mouth tilts in a lopsided smile.
Take that smug expression off of your face.
Katsuki grumbles, but his voice lacks any real bite. Much to his dismay, the smile on Deku's face becomes wider.
Why did you come bothering me?
Just wanted a change of mood.
Now it was Katsuki's turn to tilt an eyebrow. What does that even mean?
Deku shrugs. Just wanted to be 5 minutes around someone that wouldn't feel like my mom times 10, you know? The eyebrow tilt intensifies.
I guess you're talking about how half face, round face, and square face have been acting like you're made of glass these past few days.
That seems to drag a snicker out of Deku. Square face! He murmurs, mirth clear in his voice, before letting out a long sigh. But, yeah, that... I know they don't mean it, but they are taking longer than I hoped to get over it. It feels... smothery.
Katsuki isn't quite sure what it refers to.
All he knows is that Deku came back from a day he spent out the school, and then the day after his squad of friends started looking like someone was murdering kittens in front of them. He doesn't even know if he wants to ask.
Really? He replies instead, sarcastic. I cannot imagine being around someone always acting like a worrywart and being all like, oh, you looked like you needed help.
He watches, satisfied, as Deku's eyebrows knit in the middle, his mouth opening as if saying something, and one finger rising as if pointing out some mistake. But no words got out, as Deku put his hand on his chin instead. Okay, fine, you win this one, he finally admits begrudgingly. Point taken.
Sure, let's pretend you won't go back to try Katsuki. How can I help you, me, in the next 24 hours?
Oh, stop it! Deku interjects, elbowing Katsuki's thigh. I know you aren't as annoyed as you were trying to sound. With an eye roll, Katsuki pushes back the elbow that was prodding him, eliciting a small laugh out of Deku. After that, he blessedly stops talking. His presence is still vaguely irritating, but it's not like he's doing anything other than lying on the grass in silence. So Katsuki focuses back on the notes Jiro wrote for him, practicing movements with the drumsticks in the air. He's not quite sure how much time has passed when the annoying nerd speaks again. How's the practice going?
It would go better if you kept your mouth shut.
I'm not talking about the practice for the festival. I know that's going well. You make enough noise to make it clear. Deku replies, grinning. But his expression sobers fast as he turns on a side facing him. I mean those extra lessons. You think you're ready to take the provisional exam again? Katsuki sniffs as he contemplates the idea of not even dignifying that with a reply. But Deku got that familiar expression on his face. The one that says, I'm biting down and I'm not letting go.
It's none of your business. But if you really want to know, they are going fine. I'll ace that stupid exam.
He grunts, hoping that would be enough to shut him up. You got why you failed the first time, right? No such luck, of course.
Oi!
Katsuki squints, clear irritation seeping in his voice.
I'm trying to be civil here, but it's like you're purposely trying to piss me off, nerd.
Fine. I just wanted to make sure you won't make the same mistake twice. Deku replies, pouty. With one more eye roll, Katsuki pokes his forehead with one of the sticks, gaining a little ow as Deku massages the spot that was hit.
Think about that airhead of your half face. If there's one between us that risks to fail again, it ain't me.
No, Shoto's gonna do fine.
Deku immediately replies, gaining one more forceful poke. How come he doesn't get any distrust?
Because he's my boyfriend and you are more fun to provoke.
Deku quips back, sounding almost
Delighted. He turns on all fours, rising on his feet and distractedly dusting his knees. But I'm kidding. I'm sure you're going to do fine. Thanks for letting me hang around for a bit.
Yeah, whatever, don't come back. Katsuki immediately replies, shooing him.
That only seems to cause hilarity in Deku, going by the little laugh that he releases as he walks away, waving at him. Kazui's eyes follow him until he turns a corner, disappearing toward the dormitories before he releases a huff. The usual weird nerd, pulling weird stuff like coming to him when he wanted a break instead of telling his little squad to stop being worrywarts. The realization clicks suddenly. Deku came to him to feel something that wasn't worried, smothering, for a nice change. Deku, that but a couple of months prior openly told Katsuki he couldn't feel him with his quirk. And now, after they sort of, kind of, maybe started to mend their broken relationship, implied he actually felt something with his quirk. Huh. He doesn't get much time to ponder on the realization, his phone suddenly buzzing in his pocket. He puts the sticks down, fishing the object out, only to find himself in front of a text from Kirishima. I saw you and Midoriya hang out from the window. Good job!
Oh, for the love of...
Despite how sure he was he'd be able to wake up at the drop of a pin as he went to sleep that night earlier, anxious as he was, Shoto has to struggle more than he imagined to drag himself out of his futon. He pads around his room, throwing clothes on himself almost casually as he struggles to keep his eyes open. By the time he makes it down the stairs in the communal area, he's only marginally more awake. Morning! Izuku greets him, either keeping his quirk on already, or having heard the shuffle of Shoto's slippers coming closer. Breakfast? No. Shoto manages to reply, almost round, in a yawn. It's way too early to even think about putting food in me. Another jaw-cracking yawn rises from his throat as he rubs at his right eye. I thought the old man used to make me wake up early, but you win. Izuku only replies with a sniff as he serves himself the breakfast that, considering the time, was closer to a midnight snack. Despite the smell of food making Shoto's stomach twist in denial, he still drags himself closer to his boyfriend, depositing his head on Izuku's shoulder heavily and gaining back a soft little chuckle. At least drink something, Izuku murmurs, tilting his head just enough to rub his cheek against Shoto's hair. There should be enough hot water for a tea in the kettle. That he could probably stomach. Shoto turns his face just enough to peck at Izuku's cheek before moving away toward the kettle and the box of tea bags that Yaoyorozu seems to keep constantly overflowing. The peaceful silence is only interrupted by his sips or the soft noises of Izuku's chopsticks as they sit side by side in the empty communal area, washed in soft blue tones coming from the sun that just barely started rising somewhere over the horizon. Mug almost emptied, Shoto feels finally awake enough to have a bit of anxiety seep in him like a snake. He pretty much forced himself to fall asleep the prior evening after he and Izuku separated for the night. The past few days had been pretty harsh after Izuku came back from the exams he had to endure at the hospital with horrifying news, which wasn't helped by Izuku's apparently uncaring attitude about the whole ordeal. He promised Shoto that wasn't the case, that he just didn't want to let this drag him down, tank his morale, but... Sighing, Shoto let the last bit of tea roll around at the bottom of his mug before throwing his head back and drinking. He had no idea why Izuku asked him to wake up at such a time with the promise he'd tell him something important that would hopefully lay to rest some of Shoto's more oppressing worries. Had no idea why it was even necessary to get up before the sun even rose in order to fulfill this promise. But Izuku asked, and Shoto just accepted because he just couldn't say no to that cute, reckless face. Are you wearing a jacket? It's pretty cold out there at this hour. Izuku asks as they stand by the door after they both rapidly washed the few cutlery that were used, vaguely leaning down to put on his shoes. In place of an answer, Shoto puts his right hand on Izuku's shoulder, rising the temperature just enough to win a small laugh. All right, point taken. Let's go. He follows, their breaths immediately condensing in front of their faces as soon as they got out the pleasing warmth of the dormitory. The sky was still light blue, although it was rapidly brightening, and the only noises were the chirping of birds and rustle of leaves. It was quite pleasing walking like this, hand in hand, in the peaceful quietness.
So?
Shoto asks softly, after they turned away from the main road to plunge into the woods surrounding Yue's grounds. Izuku smiles. We aren't there yet, he replies, and at Shoto's quizzical hum, he adds, There's a reason I asked you to get up this early. We need to talk, and we need to do so away from prying ears. He blinks, and while Shoto did not need confirmations to know Izuku was keeping his Quergon, considering the lack of cane, the fact that he rushes to add, It's not a bad, we need to talk, it isn't just the two of us that needs it, is pretty telling.
You're going to be cryptic as much as you can, aren't you?
Izuku snickers.
I get my fun where I can, he replies, grinning. Almost there. It's somehow surprising, and simultaneously not surprising at all,
to see a familiar shape as they step in a small clearing in the woods. All Might is already impeccably dressed in a suit despite the hour. He looks as tall and lanky as usual, but seems to be healthier as he grins at them, giving a small wave. Good morning, Shoto says as they walk up to him, turning a bit toward Izuku. So this is why you were so hell-bent we'd sleep in our rooms lately.
Huh. A lap-sided little smile pulls at Izuku's lips.
Yeah, didn't want to wake you up so early every single morning. He shrugs. You don't seem surprised.
I'm not, Shoto interjects honest. It's not exactly a secret at this point that Izuku shares a close bond with All Might. So, what's up?
All Might, that had been following their brief banter with a vague shade of amusement to his smile, rapidly loses it, sighing.
I'm afraid things are going to get heavy. Forgive me for that,
he says quietly.
Who do you think should begin, young Midoriya?
Izuku curls his nose, mouth thinning, as if he's smelling something unpleasant. Then he sighs. You start. He releases Shoto's hand, giving him a small pat on the shoulder. I'll go warm up a bit. Give you two some privacy, he adds before trotting away and starting on some stretches far enough as to not hear them. Shoto gulps around a small ball of nerves that suddenly lodged itself in his throat. He's not quite looking at All Might's face, more at a point over his left shoulder, but he still can't see the melancholic little smile that pulls at All Might's mouth.
Sorry for making you get here so early, but I thought the things we want to tell you would better be shared in as much privacy as possible.
He starts, soft.
I won't beat around the bush. I had a chance to speak face to face with your mother.
He can't help but tense up, back straighter. Shoto gulps once more around the knot in his throat, pushing his hands in his pockets just to have something to do. Okay, he replies, careful. All Might seems to take a second before continuing.
We spoke quite a bit, and are keeping in contact via phone.
A heavy sigh, long thin fingers rising to pinch at the bridge of his nose.
I know.
In any other circumstances, Shoto would have wondered what exactly All Might could mean with that, I know. But not now. Not when he was asked to get up before the sun, meet All Might in the privacy of the woods, and get informed of the fact that the man was now apparently in direct contact with his mother. His fists, still deeply stuffed in the pockets of his jeans, tighten a bit.
I've been suspecting for a while, but the confirmations I've got ended up being well over any of my worst suspicions.
All Might continues in a murmur.
I'm sorry, young Todoroki,
Don't! Shoto snaps before taking a deep breath, pushed down the erratic beats of his heart. Don't apologize. Nothing of what happened is your fault. He's still not quite looking at All Might's face, but it doesn't really matter. The man is releasing sadness and regret in waves.
Young Midoriya told me you would say that.
He comments, tone melancholic.
I won't burden you with my regrets, but I'm still sorry you had to endure that. No child should be subjected to that kind of treatment.
His voice hardened significantly at that. It was almost chilling.
Needless to say, there are very many things I'd like to do with this information, but I don't want to do anything that would put you in danger or make you uneasy.
He sighs deeply.
So I'd like to hear your opinion. What should we do?
Shoto blinks, finally turning his gaze enough to meet All Might's. There's a fire burning in the azure of his sunken irises, something that tickles at Shoto's stomach. Suddenly he feels like if he said just one single word, that would be enough for All Might to move hell on earth and make sure Shoto would receive the justice he deserves for what he had to bear. But he doesn't want that. Not now. Maybe not ever. I don't want to do anything.
Young Totoro.
No, listen. Shoto interrupts, voice almost pleading. I understand that the idea of acting as if nothing is wrong, now that you know, is unbearable, but this isn't only about me. This is about my mother too. About my siblings. About the world. He takes a second trying to collect his thoughts. It's so hard trying to bare his soul to anyone other than Izuku, other than their friends. We are all in a precarious situation now that you have retired, and for how much I dislike my father, I cannot deny he's good at what he does. He's kind of supporting the whole system right now, as we are all trying to find a new stability. I don't want to threaten that, and I don't want to gamble on the safety of my family either. My mother is being taken care of. I can see that she's improving a lot, and both my brother and sister are still connected to him, whether I like it or not. Blessedly, All Might didn't interrupt him even as Shoto took another handful of seconds to collect his thoughts, glancing at Izuku's small figure in the distance, still busying himself with some basic exercises. I'm okay, really. I'm safe. I'm here. I have Izuku and all our friends. I have you to rely on. He was still looking at Izuku, but he didn't miss the tiny jump of surprise that shook All Might at those words. I'm happier than I've ever been here. I don't know if I will ever forgive my father for what he has done. More to my mom than to me, really. If I'll ever do, I'll do on my own terms. But pushing this under everyone's eyes, with only help in dragging all that bitterness and rage I had back to the surface, and I'm tired of being bitter and angry. I just want to move on.
His actions aren't justifiable in any way, and he should probably face his mistakes and take responsibility.
All Might replies, softly rough, after long seconds of silence.
Still, I do understand your feelings, so I'll ask only once. Are you really sure you prefer to keep this a secret?
In a perfect world, he should face proper justice, but that's not the world we live in. Shoto shrugs, turning back to All Might. I've thought about this plenty, so yes, I'm sure. All Might sighs deeply, closing his eyes, and then opening them once more, slowly.
Very well. My lips are sealed.
He murmurs.
Just promise me you will tell me if you ever change your mind, and if you ever need to talk about anything.
I promise. Shoto replies softly as All Might trails off. And I will. I know I can trust you now. That's enough to finally cut through the clear sadness in All Might's eyes, dragging a small smile out of him. Thin fingers brush against Shoto's shoulder, hesitating for a second before squeezing gently. When Shoto turns and throws his arms around All Might's waist in an impromptu hug, the man sighs, putting a gentle touch on Shoto's hair. It's quick, going by in only a handful of seconds as they share that gentle moment before stepping back. All Might sniffs briefly before speaking again in a much lighter tone.
I think young Midoriya had a point, giving me the first turn.
He comments cryptic, gaining a raised eyebrow from Shoto.
Go call him, we still have one important topic to talk about.
Izuku stops as he hears the soft noise of feet on grass, turning slightly. You can turn it back on if you want, Shoto says, voice low, putting a gentle touch on his bicep. Yagi-sensei asked me to call you for whatever it is that you want to tell me. Hesitating just some seconds, Izuku ponders on Shoto's tone. He's quiet, but doesn't seem to sound particularly rattled. That's a good thing, hopefully. He's still not sure if he wants to keep his quirk on for what is about to happen. Even if he gave Shoto and All Might all the privacy he could by actively not prodding into their feelings as they spoke, he couldn't stop his overactive imagination in making him feel like he was still doing so, telling him surely there would be so much anxiety and sadness and anger coming from them as they discussed Shoto's past. And that was enough to make his stomach feel like someone deposited a block of iron directly in it.
Izuku?
He sighs. Sorry, got distracted. He replies, a lopsided smile on his mouth. Did things go okay? Shoto hums, stepping closer. He nudges his shoulder against Izuku's just slightly.
It's fine. I'll tell you the details later.
He must be curious. Izuku can't exactly blame him for that. He nods, turning as he instinctively rises one hand along Shoto's forearm, curling his fingers around his elbow for guidance, as Shoto, not commenting on his clear refusal to turn his quirk on, guides him back toward All Might.
Want me to begin?
All Might asks, practical. Considering how anxious he initially felt as Izuku proposed the idea to him a handful of days prior, he sounded pretty calm. Izuku wasn't quite sure if he was putting a front for their sake, or if he just came to terms with it. Okay, before we begin, Shoto pipes up, careful. Are you going to tell me you are actually father and son?
All Might makes a strangled noise as Izuku releases a splutter and a laugh.
Shoto! Once, he replies, the movement of his arm suggesting he's shrugging. I mean, all this secrecy is kind of suspicious, you know. Izuku snickers, shaking his head. That silliness was enough to cut through the vague sense of anxiety that was clogging his chest at the idea of revealing what was probably his biggest secret. There was no need to be afraid. Shoto was Shoto! Izuku could tell him anything. Let me start, Izuku says, shaking his head, clearly amused. His tone sobers considerably as he tightens his fingers around Shoto's elbow, turning toward him just slightly. Shoto, I know you've been worrying non-stop ever since I showed you the results of those exams. The only response he receives to that is a pointed sniff, so Izuku continues. I know you have questions about the way I use my quirk, and that you worry about the consequences, so, this is something I've kind of wanted to tell you for a while, so I might as well do it now, and I guess make you worry less. He hesitates a second, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I'm not quite sure it will make you worry any less, to be honest, but here we go, I guess. He adds in a low mutter. At that, All Might sighs heavily.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure either. I guess this will be more of a shift of worry.
He chuckles briefly.
In any case, I'm sure you've wondered about young Midoriya's rather unusual physical abilities, have you not?
It's clear that the question is directed at Shoto, so Izuku keeps his mouth shut as a few seconds of silence go by. I can't deny I find it puzzling, he replies, careful. I mean, with training, quirks can be used in a variety of ways, but it's still hard to see the correlation between Izuku's empathic radar and his ability to punch holes in the concrete. All Might hums.
Well, let me just give you a brief explanation.
Izuku slides his hand back down to entwine his fingers with Shoto's, as All Might gives him an abridged version of the story he shared with Izuku himself months prior. Shoto is stonily silent, if a bit tense, as he listens. It was probably for the better that Izuku chose to keep his radar off, both to give his boyfriend some privacy, and because he's sure whatever must be storming inside Shoto as the truth is revealed to him mustn't be nice, considering, well, everything. Shoto sighs deeply once All Might is done explaining the history of One for All. I guess... He starts indecisive, his hold on Izuku's hand tightening. I guess that you are about to tell me that you've passed this power to Izuku, aren't you? A tense silence falls on the three of them, and Izuku can hear All Might shifts his weight nervously as he works his throat.
You don't seem surprised.
He manages to drag out of his mouth, heart beating painfully in his chest. I'm not, Shoto replies almost in a whisper. I've been suspecting something since Camino Ward. Not this. I don't think I could have ever imagined this, but I knew something was up. He goes silent for a couple of seconds before sighing. That explains a lot.
Are you okay?
All Might asks, clearly indecisive, enough to make Izuku almost take in consideration the idea of turning his quirk on. At his side, Shoto shrugs. It's weird, but I don't know. I guess it makes sense. He turns toward Izuku just slightly. You really wanted to tell me this? I don't like keeping secrets from people, especially not from you. But, well, I'm sure you understand why I'm not exactly shouting it from the roofs, don't you? There's a long stretch of silence. When Shoto speaks again, he sounds vaguely strangled. Yeah, I think keeping it a secret is certainly for the better. Thanks for telling me, though.
You're not going to worry about young Midoriya any less, are you?
All Might interjects softly, almost tender. Shoto releases a huff. Not in the slightest, but at least I won't have to fear he might bleed his brain out next time I see him kick something into oblivion. He replies, a somehow self-depreciating humor in his tone. At the start of school, you didn't add this One for All yet, didn't you? Izuku shakes his head briefly before adding, It happened after the USJ. All Might wanted to wait, ask me after I had the time to study and be a bit more experienced. Shigaraki kind of forced his hand. Shoto replies flat. Well, at least you were responsible enough to not ask him the second you met him.
I have to admit the thought crossed my mind.
All Might replies, sounding in equal parts amused and embarrassed.
Izuku laughs, surprised.
At that, Shoto seems to go considerably less tense, his shoulders drooping a bit.
You woke me up at an ungodly hour to drop 2 bombs like these on me,
he says, tiredly amused.
Honestly. Sorry? Izuku replies, forcing a guilty grin on his face. Shoto releases a deep, almost theatrical sigh. What have you two been up to meeting so early in the morning anyway? Just practicing some ranged attacks. It's kind of the only hour we could do it between lessons and our preparations for the festival. Izuku shrugs. Wanna help me out? I could use some training with moving targets.
Sure.
Shoto replies easily, muzzling Izuku's hair affectionately. I'll give you some hail to hit. And as he steps away, Izuku finally turns his quirk on. Kinda necessary to hit fast-moving targets after all. Not really thinking much. And the sudden wave of deep affection he can feel from both Shoto and All Might is almost suffocating in a warm, pleasing sort of way. Maybe he just worried too much about having this talk. It's clear that the both of them are much more resilient than Izuku thought. End of A Begin in the Dark by Noha Ijiachi. If you enjoyed this recording or the content, feel free to leave a comment below or a review at the original story from the link in the description. Thank you for listening.